up guys, it's me up in New Zealand and welcome back to my channel. In this channel, I'm gonna share with you guys my life in New Zealand as a former international student and now a worker, as well as give you guys some advice and tips when living here in New Zealand. So stay tuned to my channel, subscribe, and let's get on to the video. One of the most important decisions when thinking about moving abroad to live is to find a right accommodation option and to find a nice place to stay. It's the same thing when you move here to New Zealand, and there are various options of accommodation that can be suitable for you. In the previous video, I have given you guys two main common accommodation option, mostly for students, which is a homestay or in the hall of residence, aka dorm. And these are really common option, but they have its own advantages as well as disadvantages that I have talked about. So if you haven't watched that video, you can click on the link down below to rewatch that video. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about the most common option that can be suitable for both student and worker, or anyone wanting to come over here to stay for a little bit longer of time. That is renting. So there's a different type of rental option for you, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this video, as well as give you guys the advice on where to find and how to find the right one for you. So there are typically three options of renting here in New Zealand. You can be the first one is renting as a head tenant of a place. It can be either unit, apartment, or house. The second option is renting a studio room with a common living area and kitchen. And the third option is to be a flatmate and renting and be a subtenant of a place and have agreement straight with the head tenant of that place, either house or unit. And each of the options have its own advantages as well as disadvantages, and the price will be vary as well. So I will give you guys a more detail of each option. So the first one is renting as a head tenant. This means that you will have the agreement straight with the landlord or a renting agency as a head tenant of that specific place, and you have the full responsibility for that place. Anything would come with payment of the house or any damages that happen to the house, you will have full responsibility for that damages. In case there any problem occurring when you're staying, you can contact straight with the renting agency or that landlord for it to be resolved. This is a very great option for people who are coming over here with their family or having friends or someone they already know living here in New Zealand, so they all can share in the same place, either a house or unit, and living among each other, typically for someone you already know. And this really great if you like private and you like to live with someone you can trust. This particularly perfect option if you have many people involving and wanting to renting together, because you can share the expenses within the house, and the renting price when divided among all the people that you live in the house, that will be reduced significantly and you can save quite a lot. It also gives you guys a lot of privacy and comfort since you live among someone you already know. However, if you're renting with your family or some friends and people who you already know renting at the same time, you can also all share the tenancy in the same contract with the landlord or the renting agency. This means says that everyone who lives in the house can be counted as a main tenants, and they all have responsibility when it comes to living there or payment or dealing with all the damages. And if anything happen, you don't have to be the only one have to deal with the landlord. If you're planning to stay for long term, this also gives you great stability, because when you're signing the contract, if anything happen, let's say the landlord want to end the contract, they have to give you a certain amount of notice so you can find another place, at least around 1 month, if I remember it right. Or if any of the tenants in the house, let's say your friend want to move away, they also need to give the landlord or the tenants at least 4 weeks in advance or of the notice before they can move out, and it's also give you the time to looking for a new person to replace that tenants, or if you don't want to, it will be fine. However, having a binding contract in some cases or some situation can be a disadvantage for you. The first disadvantages that can be quite a problem for some people, that is the bond. So this is the money that most landlord or renting agency would require you to give in advance beside your renting, as 4 weeks worth of rent payment in a form of bond. So this will be a security money for the landlord to cover in case you break the contract or you damage something to the house that need to be fixed. So that will be resolved right away and be deducted out that bond. And depend on the place that you rent and the amount of the renting payment, this can be a huge money. For example, if you want to rent a $500 a week house, then you have to pay at least $2,000 in bond, and it's quite a big money. So you need to somehow find a way to have it in advance in order to start the pay the bond. And it not just end by paying the bond, it's also a problem when you want to get the bond back when you finish the contract, because in some cases when you deal with a bad landlord or a renting agency, they can try to find every little excuses not to pay you back that money. And most of the time will be finding some damage in the house and claiming it as you causing it. That's why it's very important when you move into a place, you need to take a picture of every possible damage that already there as a proof to them when we're moving out. They cannot claim that at what you damage and take your money. Another disadvantages when renting as a head tenant or maintenance in the house is that you have to be responsible for the payment as well as the damages when you are the last person to move out of that place. So let's say other tenants in the house, they want to move out and you still planning to stay there after they moving out. Anything when it due to damage, even though it caused by that person, but you didn't check for that damage, when you're moving out, you are the last person there, so you will have to take responsible for that damage and you have to pay it out of your pocket. Another thing is that the payment. So let's say you have 3 other friends who live there and you share the renting divided by 3, but then one move out and you didn't want to find the one who replaced that tenant or that friend room, but by then the payment still be the same and you have to take over that other room too. So unless you can find a replacement, your payment actually going up since you have to take over the share of that room too. Speaking of moving, it can be also a problem if you have a binding contract. What I mean by this is in case you have emergency that you need to move to another city or even out of the country, then you have to break the contract. And in case there's 2 types of contract, that you either have a fixed term contract for 6 months or a year or a specific month in that contract you agree from the beginning. If it hasn't come to that end yet, you either have to pay compensation or some amount because you haven't finished that contract as agreed. And or even if you have a continuous contract and you have to give the agents or the landlord at least 4 weeks of notice before you move out, you still have to pay that payment even though you move in the next day. So moving can be a little bit of hassle. The second option is renting out a studio. Here in New Zealand, the studio means that you will have to rent a room that normally have an ensuite or a private bathroom in your room, and you will have to share the living area and the kitchen with the other room in the same house. This is a great option for people who are mostly living alone or with one partner without children or pet, and you mostly want to access your work conveniently and have a modern living space with all the furniture. Then this is awesome because they all can meet your requirement. When renting a studio, you normally have the agreement directly with the agency or the landlord, and you really just have to have responsibility to take care of your own room, and not really for the common area, such as the living room or the kitchen. And unless you have a very significant damage to the living area or the kitchen, basically you just need to keep your room tidy enough when you're moving out. This is a very great option for people who are very busy and mostly stay outside the house, but also like your own privacy when you get back to your own room, and rarely use like equipment or cooking. So you don't need to take care of that cleaning in the common area as much. As long as you keep it tidy when you use it, there will be someone who will regularly come to clean that area. This also reduces the stress of finding a flatmate to share the living expenses as well as the renting, because the expenses normally will be included in the rent, and no matter how many people are in the house that occupy how many rooms, your rent will always stay the same since it's all included, and the responsibility of finding another tenants will be on the agent or the landlord hand. So basically all you have to do is just moving in and live without worrying too much about furniture. And this also means that if your job requires to move through different places every once in a while, you can have this kind of accommodation and can move to different city comfortably, as long as you give the landlord or the agency that the notice before you move out. And I think it's the same 4 weeks notice. Then you can move anywhere you want, freely as you can. Of course, it does came with some disadvantages, and one of it is the price. Obviously, when you take into account of expenses or included in the price, or the maintenance and cleaning in the living area fees, the management fee, and the furniture to set up your room, it's all taken account of. So the price will be slightly higher than just having the room that you share the house with other tenants. Since you already have the agreement directly with the landlord or the agency to rent your own room only, and you don't have to take care of finding the flatmate, you don't have the influence or the decision making when it comes to who you're gonna live with. Other tenants can move out regularly, same as you can, and it can be quite of an inconvenience when to constantly living with different people in the same house when you have your own room. Another problem that you might come across when living in this townhouse in a big city is that if it's a very prime location that near some big corporate or the business area, there will be a lot of townhouse next to each other in the same row or area, and since we don't have enough space for parking, you need to park on the street, and it can be quite competitive to find parking on the street because they all have different townhouse in the area and people can live right next to each other. Because imagine in one lot there are 5 townhouse, and in each townhouse they have around 4 to 5 rooms. That means that in one lot of, like, let's say 500 square meter, they already have like 20 people living there, so it has to be at least 20 car, or around 20 car, and it will already line up one part of the street. So imagine there's different lot like that with different townhouse, so it's quite very hard for you to have your own car and you want to find parking space. They normally also charge you extra if you want to secure park in the same lot or in the parking space, because it's very limited. And the third option, which is the most affordable option and common option for a single person, is to find a flatmate. So when renting as a flatmate, you normally have the agreement with the head tenants of that place, instead of the landlord or the agency, because that head tenants already rent that place with the landlord or the agency, and they might need to find another tenants or aka a flatmate to live with them to share the expenses as well as the rent. This mostly be an informal way of renting since you don't really have the tenants agreement with the landlord or the agency, and mostly it's just a flatmate agreement saying that you rented this place as a flatmate and your general responsibility with the tenants. Well, even though it's not really a formal way of renting, you still get some kind of responsibility when it comes to damages happen to the house, and they most require you to have at least 2 weeks of bond. Depend on the places, some just have, they even have 3 or 4 weeks, depend on that head tenants. This is very great option because firstly, when it comes to price, it's the most affordable of all options, especially when you're only living alone, only wanting to rent by yourself, but you cannot afford a whole place that have different room by yourself, but also, or even a studio, because it's all still quite expensive. So living with stranger, you can still share the expenses and the renting, which in even account of all of the expenses is still much cheaper than other two options. So in some case, if you don't have a formal agreement as a flatmate agreement, then it's quite easy for you to move out since you don't have to give 4 weeks notice at normal. If you just have agreement, mouth agreement with the head tenants, and if you can find a replacement, they're happy to let you go wherever. Being the cheapest option also come with having the most risk of all other options when it comes to renting as a flatmate for yourself as a flatmate, and also a risk for the head tenants who looking for a flatmate. So in terms of being a flatmate, there are quite a lot of risks involved in it. Firstly, you don't really know the head tenants and their lifestyle and their personality, so there might be some disagreement with living with each other, because unlike the first option where you're renting out with your family, your friends, someone you already know, this is completely with a stranger, so you cannot ever tell how they are. They are also concerned in terms of security, because since they are a stranger, you cannot tell their about their background or their bad side personality that might be occurring in a worst case scenario. There's also risk of losing your bond when you're moving out, because if you don't have a proper writing or flatmate agreement saying how much bond have you paid, then when you move out, they might be slow on it or trying to avoid it altogether, and it might be quite of a hassle to ask for it back, especially when you don't have the agreement. That's why it needed to be written agreement in some form when you're moving in, if this happens to have bond related. Most of the time when you're renting as a flatmate, your room don't really have enough furniture, or sometimes no furniture at all. So if you don't want to pay for furniture, you have to do more research when finding the right room that already include furniture that you might need it. And since you live with stranger and someone you don't really know, I would definitely recommend to rent a room in a house with like 2 to 3 rooms maximum, because the less people, the less problem. Also, it means that you don't have to share the bathroom and the common area as much. When it comes to risk, the head tenant also had to deal with quite a lot of problem when looking for a flatmate, completely a stranger, because firstly, they don't really have much way to do a background check on the flatmate. So of course, you don't know much about their background and how they are, what they're doing. Another thing is that you might risk of them not wanting to pay rent or paying it slow and intentionally damage the place that you rent out, which you have responsibility to with the landlord and the agency, since you're the head tenants. And if it's not planning to pay out those damages, that will come straight out of the head tenant pocket. Of course, those are just some extreme example that might happen in a worst case scenario. But if you happen to find a good place to stay with affordable price and nice flatmate, that is the ultimate option for you when it comes to renting as a flatmate. So those are the options that you have when it comes to renting out. In the next video, I'm gonna talk about how and where to find places to rent and what should you looking for when renting a place, depend on your preference and situation. So stay tuned for the next video, subscribe to my channel, and click the bell notification button so you can be the first one to see the next video. Bye.